Hare Krishna, very dear devotees, warm welcome back once again to our ever ongoing series on the glories of our beloved Sri Vrindavan Dham. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, we are continuing with our mini-series on the Samadhis of our acharyas, and this will be part 2. Today we'll discuss in detail about the Samadhis themselves, their history, their purpose, as well as their different shapes and sizes, etc. Now, to begin with, one interesting fact is that the Samadhis that we construct for our acharyas and saints are not common in other Vaishnava sampradayas, such as the Vallabha, Pushtimarg, and Nirvarka sampradayas. The tradition of placing acharyas and other great devotees in samadhis is seen and celebrated mainly in our Gaudiya Vaishnava sampradaya. And the principal reason for this is that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself placed Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur in Samadhi along the seashore in Jagannath Puri 500 years ago. And from that day, official permission for giving Samadhi to Vaishnava Acharyas was granted by Mahaprabhu himself. In time it became popular to say that Samadhis are more than temples built by Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Samadhis are more than temples built by Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And the reason behind this was to give respect to the exalted Vaishnavas in their Samadhis, by whose mercy we become attached and develop our love for Radha and Krishna in their temples. The tradition was, and you could say to a certain extent still is, for one to offer respects to an acharya at his samadhi and then go to see the temple and deity that he established. For example, previously one would go to Rupa Goswami's samadhi first and then go to Jayapur to have darshan of Govindaji. Similarly, one would take darshan of Srila Jiva Goswami in his samadhi, and then offer respects to his deities of Radha Damodar. So first the devotee of the Lord, and then the Lord himself. In the Adi Purana, there's the following statement by Lord Krishna to Arjuna: Yeme bhakta jana partha, name bhaktas chate jana, mad bhaktanam chaye bhaktas, teme bhakta tama mata. My dear Partha, one who claims to be my devotee is not so. Only a person who claims to be the devotee of my devotee is actually my devotee. So that tradition is there in our sampradaya, because if one goes directly to see the Lord, the Lord may or may not recognize the devotee because of his level of sadhana or devotion. It may not be great enough to attract Krishna's attention. But if we go first to the personality who manifested the Lord, who asked the Lord to appear in that deity form, that personality, that devotee, may kindly recommend us to the Lord. And then the Lord, in that deity form, will accept us. That's you could say, a basic principle in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Srila Prabhupada said of Krishna's favorite devotee, Srimati Radharani, in a lecture on September 5th, 1973. And I quote Srila Prabhupada: anyone who comes before Radharani to serve Krishna, she becomes so pleased. Oh, here is a devotee of Krishna. She immediately recommends, Krishna, oh, here is a devotee. He's better than me. So we owe everything to our acharyas, who, as Sri Radha's representatives, recommend us to Krishna. Now this is particularly applicable to members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness who are completely dependent on our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada to deliver us to the lotus feet of Radha and Krishna. The Vaishnava poet Kishore Sharan, one of my favorite, he writes lovingly about our acharyas who underwent great austerities on our behalf in Sri Vrindavan Dham in the past several hundred years, particularly 500 years ago, to give us Krishna consciousness. It's very beautiful what he writes. Dear devotees, he begins, behold the beauty of the dust of Vrindavan, which hides the footprints of the barefoot walking acharyas. Behold the vines and groves of Vrindavan, where the Goswamis rested for a few minutes and chanted the names of Krishna while feeling tired. Look at Sri Jamunaji, where countless times our Goswamis took holy baths. O brother, the fortunate sun's rays touched the lotus feet of these acharyas, which had swelled from circumambulating Giriraj Govardhan. Poor Kishore Sharan now sees Vrindavan, which was once Vihara Shtali, a place of playful pastimes, as Tapashtali, a place of penance due to the austerities of our acharyas. Wow. So we owe so much to all the acharyas in our line. So when in Vrindavan, or even within our minds, let us visit the Samadhis of our acharyas and other great souls to show our gratitude. And then visit their pranadhans. Pranadhans means the lords of their hearts, their deities. There's that popular bhajan. Jaya Radha Govinda Radhe Rupa Goswami Prandana He Jaya Radha Govinda Radhe. Because Radha Govinda are the Prandhanas, the lords of Rupa Goswami's life. That bhajan is pointing out that Radha Govinda are the lords of his life, Prandana He. Actually, after a year of preaching in the West, each year when I come to Vrindavan, I make it a point to visit Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi and give him a report of my services throughout the year. Then I take his permission to have darshan of Gaur-Nitai, Krishna Balaram and his beloved Radhasham Sundar in our Krishna Balaram Mandir. Now, when visiting Samadhis in Vrindavan, we'll see that some are 500 years old, others are 200, 300, or 400 years old, while others were established in recent decades. Now, during these periods, going back 500 years to begin with, there was a constant change in the Samadhi styles and shapes. For example, 500 years ago, I was reading that the Samadhis of Rupa Goswami, Jiva Goswami, and Raghunath Das Goswami were originally very simple. Basically just a small platform over which they were interred. Almost like a little platform for sitting, very small. Now one may question why such a simple dais or platform was made for such big acharyas in our tradition. Why so small? The answer is because in those days there was always the constant threat of attacks by Mughals and other invaders. And if the devotees at that time were to have made a big, beautiful structure, then surely the invaders would have broken it. In the same way they damaged many temples in Vrindavan and elsewhere. Therefore, to distract, or you could say avoid an attack on the Acharya Samadhis, only a small raised platform was used over their grave where they were interred. Now, of course, other additions to the Samadhis were made later, as we see the Samadhis today. But those small platforms can still be seen inside the expanded Samadhis today. In the same light, near the Madan Mohan temple in Vrindavan is the sacred Samadhi of Srila Sanatana Goswami. That's one of my favorite places. From a distance, the shape of his Samadhi is like a small pillar with a conical or like umbrella decoration on top. And it was made in such a way so that the invaders would think it was something insignificant. A little pillar, a little conical. But for the Vaishnavas, the Samadhi Mandir of Srila Sanatana Goswami, it's a most sacred place where their hearts, you could say, resonate in love and devotion for Srila Sanatana Goswami. Now, sometime after the departure of the six Goswamis, the tradition of making more elaborate structures began, actually by utilizing the style of a marble umbrella-like dome, but much larger, of course, with four beautifully carved pillars holding it up. If you look at the Samadhis these days, you can envision it's kind of like an umbrella, like shaped like an umbrella, marble. And then there's four pillars to support it there. Now this addition, it actually came from the Rajput kings in Rajasthan, who developed this style when building memorials. The Vaishnavas in Vrindavan saw that, and they adopted that same style for making the Samadhis. When you go to Jaipur, you can see many structures like that, different shrines who have that kind of umbrella marble and then the four pillars there. And it's really interesting in Jaipur. So, a wonderful example of that adopted style of Rajasthani architecture is there in the Samadhi of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. His Samadhi is situated in the area of the Radha Gokulananda temple. But Rajasthani architecture wasn't the only architecture that influenced embellishing the simplicity of the original Samadhis. The Samadhi of Gopal Bhatta Goswami is also in this Rajasthani architecture, but the Samadhi of Rupa Goswami, which was of course constructed more later, it's in typical Bengali architecture. The Samadhi of Madhu Pandit is in the Arisan architecture style. The Samadhi of Raghunath Das Goswami is in the style of Bengal Assam architecture, I read. Bengal Assam architecture. The Samadhi of a great devotee of Mahaprabhu, Gopal Guru, near the Jamuna, is in the style of Madhya Pradesh mixed with Rajasthani architecture. I like to visit that Samadhi. And the Samadhi of Narahari Chakravarti near Radhakund is actually in the style of Mughal architecture. Interesting. Now, unfortunately, in Vrindavan, there are a number of incidents in which the land where Samadhis of great souls were situated was eventually sold for development, like apartment buildings and factories and things like that. And those Samadhis themselves were demolished and covered over with these buildings. And the divine forms of many of great souls rest under those buildings. It's actually very sad. Now, throughout history, and even at present, ladies are not allowed to physically touch Samadhis. However, it's accepted that they can cover their hands with their saris or dupatas and then reverentially touch the Samadhis. That's allowed, I was reading. This is because it's considered that the acharya is still present in the samadhi, and ladies should not directly touch the renunciates or acharyas directly. Now, in the samadhis of the acharyas and saints, mostly renounced sadhus perform the required services there to maintain, not only to maintain the samadhi, but to keep the worship going for those great souls in their samadhis. The tradition in Vrindavan is that the Goswamis and their families serve the deities in the temples, where renounced sadhus serve the acharyas in their samadhis. Actually, such sadhus do many services while taking care of the acharyas' samadhis. In the early morning, they begin by placing a walking stick next to that small dais, that small platform inside, under which the acharya is interred. Then they place a water pot made from clay called koro before the platform. Then they place a big bowl made out of bell metal for offering prasadam before that little platform. Then they offer a handkerchief or a towel, and it's really interesting, 2 bolster cushions known as masnad, for support of one's back while chanting japa. I was reading that to have a bolster behind the back during japa and meditation is considered a spiritual luxury for the acharyas. Then, and this is all early morning, they offer a flower garland, beads to chant japa with, and a hand fan. This is all placed on top of the small platform. Now these articles that I mentioned are considered as essentials for any samadhi. In some samadhis, there's also a tradition of placing a hand-painted picture of the acharya who is interred in any particular samadhi. And a cloth is used as a border around the frame, and the painting is decorated with chandan, sandalwood paste, dots on the glass covering the painting, and those dots are placed around the head of the acharya. In olden days, marble footprints of the acharya were made and placed in front of the platform inside, and those marble footprints were actually the main object of worship for those who came to pay their respects to the acharyas. They would worship those the lotus feet of the acharya in marble. Like that. Also interesting is that in some samadhis, the acharyas, the previous acharyas' beads are displayed, but they're covered in a stitched cloth. It looks like a garland, actually. I've seen that. They take the japa mala and they tie around a cloth. They stitch a cloth like that. And it looks like a garland. And because the tradition is that after the disappearance of an acharya, his mala should not be displayed openly. It can be there, but it's covered. However, we are fortunate because there's a beautiful pair of Srila Prabhupada's japa beads in his house, in his home, in his quarters at the Krishna Balaram Mandir, in that small museum that's been built for. We can have darshan of different paraphernalia of Srila Prabhupada. I think there's actually 2 sets of japa beads in there. They're not covered. We can see them firsthand. Some special mercy. Now, another tradition in the samadhis of our Gaudiya Vaishnava acharyas is that at the base of the samadhi, one can see a Gaudiya Vaishnava tilak mark, as well as the names of Nitai Gaur. That's the tradition, written in Bengali. Or sometimes the names of Radha and Krishna are also written at the base. So we can see that such samadhis are, let's say, an essential part of past and present Vrindavan. And as we mentioned several times, we should visit them and pray for mercy. There's a special place in Vrindavan where there's 64 Samadhis. 64 Samadhis, and many great acharyas are interred there. I've been there several times. It's a very mystical experience to walk amongst those Samadhi mandirs and have kirtan and pray and glorify all the great souls. So when in Vrindavan, one should visit Samadhis. And those of us who are members of ISKCON, we should first, when we get to Vrindavan, go to Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi and ask his blessings to enter into Sri Vrindavan Dham, and ask his blessings to one day reside eternally in Goloka Vrindavan in the spiritual world. So everything we do in Krishna consciousness is for that purpose of going back home, back to Goloka Vrindavan. By Lord Brahma's grace, we have detailed information of Goloka Vrindavan, that topmost planet in the spiritual sky. And today I'd like to close with Lord Brahma's words in this regard from his Brahma Samhita, just to remind us of where we're going, what we want to achieve. His words should, how could you say, make our hearts flutter and increase our ololium, our greed for going back home, back to Godhead. He has spoken, it has been written. This transcendental land of Vrindavan is populated by goddesses of fortune who manifest as milkmaids and love Krishna above everything. The trees there fulfill all desires, and the waters of immortality flow through land made of philosopher's stone. Here, all speech is song, all walking is dancing, and the flute is the constant companion. Cows flood the land with abundant milk, and everything is self-luminous, like the sun. Since every moment in Vrindavan is spent in loving service to Krishna, there is no past, present, or future. Shri Brajabhumi, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki. And by the mercy of these acharyas, we will one day attain that goal. So that's enough for today. I think actually we're going to have about maybe 6 or 7 lectures on the Samadhis of our acharyas in Vrindavan. It's so nice to research it, so nice to present it, and I'm hoping that you're all enjoying it as much as well. So again, from all of us here on the Baltic Sea coast, in Poland we're having a festival every day. We send all of you our regards, and I'll look forward to being with you again next Friday. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, the revealer of the Dham. Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundar ki, Mayapur Dham ki, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Krishna Sankirtan Yagya ki, Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Jai Jai Sri Sri Radhe Sham. Haribol, my obeisances.